the success breeds the success. So that is one of the important aspects of agility. You implement it, you learn it, and then when you move to the next phase, you implement your new advanced learning into this, and then you keep on growing.
Welcome to Process Pioneers, the show that takes a deep dive into the minds of decision makers, key influencers, and process experts who are pioneering the world of everything process. Welcome to the next episode of Process Pioneers. My name is Daniel Rayner, and I'm the host of Process Pioneers. I get the absolute privilege of sitting down with different BPM practitioners and process improvement specialists, and whether they're working internally within an organization or whether they're coming from more of a consulting role and they're working with many different organizations, and therefore I guess have a more of a widespread view of how are organizations implementing BPM, what's working for different industries, different sectors, things like that. And today I have the absolute privilege of sitting down with Amit Chauhan, and he is the founder and managing partner of Q3 Edge Consulting over in India. He's also started BPM Asia, which is a once-a-year conference, I believe, where he brings BPM practitioners and specialists together, where they can discuss BPM best practices and what I was saying, what's working in your organization, how are you implementing BPM? And he was also a process consultant at Siemens for a number of years there. So I'm really excited for this interview. Amit, thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts, my experience about business process management. And I must say that this is a wonderful initiative that you have started. I have gone through various podcasts which have been done with the various experts in past, and amazing thoughts. Thank you so much for bringing such a good knowledge about business process management in industry. I think this is very much needed now.
Thanks, Amit. I appreciate it. So what we might do to begin with is I'll pass it off to you. If you can, I guess, tell me and the audience, where did that interest in process management first come from? And then take us on a journey leading up to where we are today.
All right. So this journey actually started almost like 21 years before.
Right.
When I look at this entire journey, I always feel this is more of like a maturity journey for myself. And this maturity journey has, if I divide it into the phases, I always look at it as three phases.
Right.
Phase one, when I started this career into process management, I have always been passionate about how the business are organized, how the business are performed, how the business can grow. This is from my MBA background. This has always been an area of my interest, and that actually encouraged me to move into process management. My first phase, I always consider it as a phase when I started defining the business processes. I was involved more on designing business processes, writing SOPs, and then do the reviews and audits as per the compliances. But later on, I realized the compliances were more from the statutory and the framework requirements related, EFQM or ISO and so on, but not the statutory and the regulatory requirements, which are much more concerned to the organization. So for a few years, when I was doing this rigorously, I always found there is something missing. This is not giving a real value to the organization. This question haunted me for many years. And that's, I believe, started my phase two when I got an exposure to the process improvement. So I really liked that approach where I saw the value to the organization, and then my journey moved on into process improvement in terms of green belt, black belt, master black belt from Motorola, and did various courses. And I got an exposure to these initiatives like Lean Six Sigma for many years, and still I'm doing process improvement in these areas. But I always felt, though this is better than the phase one, the maturity is high, but I always felt the improvement has always been done in this one part of the organization, not at the complete organization.
Right.
Sometimes we improve the process in one part. It is more of like passing on a bottleneck from phase one to some other department. Right. So that's again haunted me for the same question: how this organization can get the value. How can we contribute into the growth of the organization? Being a process management guys, this question is all very critical. What is the value that you're creating to the organization? that's, I believe, is actually helped me to get an exposure towards business process management. And I met many practitioners, experienced people. I believe when I met Roger Trigger in this, that's where I felt is a kind of a milestone for me, which helped me to structure this entire approach and connected all the dots. And now I feel more content, more satisfied. Yes, this is an approach. Business process management is a way of managing a business so that an organization, their commitment to their stakeholders and customers can be achieved. So that's a maturity of the journey, which is a phase 3 now for me, which is currently going on. So
that's
this
great. That's really,
my
really
journey for
interesting. Yes. And you mentioned something there about, where's the value in BPM? How are organizations getting value out of business process management? And I think that's such an important question to ask, because you don't just want output, you want impact. You don't want people just doing work for work's sake. You don't want people just documenting processes for documentation's sake. But how does those processes tie into the overall strategy? How is it delivering value to the organization? What is the impact of that work? So talk to us a little bit about how process links with strategy. How can process bring value to an organization from that strategic level?
fantastic. Daniel, I always believe an organization is a collection of the different building blocks. It is a collection of the building block of the people, processes, technology, right? But at top of it, there is a commitment to their customers and stakeholders by the management, right?
Right.
That commitment actually helps an organization to think about how the value can be created. Now, value cannot be created directly through the technology or through the people. It's a process which actually creates, accumulate, deliver the value to their customers. So business process management actually helps an organization to integrate the organization vision, strategies, their business objectives, which they define as a balanced scorecard objective, link it to the business processes. What are those business processes which are important for me in order to deliver a value to their customers? Now, that's what the process landscape plays an important role, which we also call it as a business process architecture. A very, very important element, a document and information for any organization that gives a very clarity about how the value is created in an organization, and in terms of delivering those values, what are the support processes, management commitments, what are the things required. And I believe this is one of the important element, business process architecture, that actually integrates everything. It integrates people, because you cannot execute processes by themselves. You need technology or you need people in order to do this. So what is the role of people? What is the roles, responsibilities, expectations from the people? What is the role of the technology in this? Imagine an organization where we focus more on the technology side, and if we miss out the process requirement side, it creates a huge problem to the organization, right? If I quote Job Steve, in one of his conference, he said, "I made a mistake." I would like to quote this because this is one of the fantastic statement he has given. He said, "We all make mistakes, and I made the mistakes also in my life because we did not focus on the customer expectations." I believe for any product that we need to do it, we need to start first on the customer expectations. What is the value that we are delivering to the customer, and then we should look at the technology. It should not be the other way around. And I believe this is what is an important lesson even for the organizations today. Unless until you have very absolute clarity about how the values are creating by the organization, right? Do not think about the execution. First, define that particular part, and that's where the business process management plays an important role.
Yes. Yeah, that's great. And now for an organization that is adopting BPM, and I'm sure that you've seen many different organizations adopt business process management in various, I guess, scales and degrees. What's one of the biggest challenges an organization faces when they adopt BPM?
As I said, an organization is a collection of the different building blocks. So there cannot be just one challenge. Indeed, there are the collection of the different challenges. And it all started because it's a collection of the group of the peoples, right? And we all have our different expectations, and we all are having a different background of skills and knowledge. So One of the challenge which appears in a business process management journey, I believe, is related to the mindset.
Right.
That's majorly because I believe of the two major reasons. One is there is a clarity of roles and responsibilities are not there in the organization. So when we look at the problem or the business opportunity, we work in silos. We have an absolute control within my own department or in my own function. I have an absolute clarity about it, but I do not know what is happening on the other side. Right. So that creates a kind of a mental block. What can be good for my organization or my department rather than the other one. The second reason that I see for this mindset is the knowledge and the belief.
Right.
There are good that these kind of the podcasts give a good knowledge and the right knowledge about business process management because there are so many definitions about business process management happening in the industry. Last year, when we conducted one of the survey on the business process management, you will be surprised to know that majority of the group correlated business process management with automation. Right. There was another group of second group who actually correlated business process management with outsourcing. So the challenge is that business process management is defined by different people in a different ways.
Right.
I think this knowledge is creating a different beliefs, and that is actually creating a mindset problem in an organization. And we have our own magnifier when we look at the business process management, and we look at the BPM in our own ways. So I believe mindset is one of the major challenge that I've seen in implementation of the BPM.
Yes. Okay. And obviously one question that organizations will have about business process management is, what's the value? What's the return on investment? And that's probably a question the executive team will be asking is, if we invest into this, what are we going to get in return? So do you have any examples that come to mind where an organization has implemented BPM, whether it was an incremental process improvement or whether it was a radical innovation, but this organization, they implemented BPM and they received significant value in return? Do you have an example you could share with us where that's happened?
Absolutely. In fact, that's a very good question. I think this is the fundamental basic about the business process management. Good part about the business process management is it is not associated with any certificate, right? So you're not doing it to achieve any kind of a certificate to hang on your wall and to show your customer. If you are doing BPM, you are doing it for, with the essence of achieving something for your business. So indeed, business process management always talk about what is the value or what is the commitment that you are delivering, you are giving to your customers or to your stakeholders. So how that value is created, that entire journey is created through the BPM. We do have various customers across the globe who have implemented business process management as part of their heart and soul and has become a integral part of their day-to-day operations.
Yes.
One of the insurance company in India, and I feel very proud because this company also came and participated in BPI Asia conference, and they shared their experience and they said, you know what, after implementing business process management in past 1 year, we have implemented 120 plus RPAs without fail, right? Can you imagine 120 RPAs implemented? It is all because they have defined the processes, they analyzed the processes, they saw the value of the automation or the value of the manual interventions, and then they picked up the right area where the automation is important.
Right.
They did not invest heavily onto a workflow automation or a heavy automation system. They identified the need of RP, they selected, they implemented in 120 in 1 year. Wow, that's one of the, and everyone was surprised. They they all were very happy to see the success of this business process management. We do have a lot of success stories about BPM, indeed. Yeah.
That's great. That's really good to hear. So when implementing BPM, obviously there are a number of key people in an organization that you need to get buy-in from. You need to obviously get the executive team on board. You need that sponsorship from them, but you also need to get, I guess, the sponsorship from the process practitioners or the frontline employees, the ones that it's them doing the process, and it's their process that you're improving or you're managing. And so there are a number of different parties you need to get buy-in from. So how do you get buy-in from the different stakeholders within an organization, whether it is executive or whether it is the frontline employees?
Ah, See, I believe the M in business process management is about managing your business processes, right? So managing a business process requires an integration, collaboration of the different people, right? So whenever we would like to start, whenever an organization, I would say, would like to start a business process management, the very first thing is they should answer one specific question: what is critical to the organization?
Right.
That critical can be a requirement, that can be an opportunity, that can be a problem also. But we need to understand first what is that critical requirement of that organization, or the critical question for the organization. The moment you answer the specific question, and by the way, this question cannot be answered by having a discussion with just one person or one group of people. It requires a collaboration, integration, talking to the various department of the people, different level of the people, starting from the people who are defining the strategy to the people who are actually implementing those strategies.
Yes.
And when you get a clarity about this question, this requirement, that becomes easier for any organization to initiate BPM, because then you are managing your business for a very specific and critical requirement that values to your business.
Right.
So I believe any organization or any consulting organization who would like to support to any of the organization on their BPM journey must first identify what values to the organization, quantify that value. We talk a lot about tangible and intangible benefits, but indeed, you need to show the value in terms of the tangible to some extent. Otherwise, it becomes difficult to get the buying, or at the end of the project to evaluate where you were earlier or where you are now. So, A, identification of the requirement, identification of B, validating those requirements as a critical to the organization, is a need of an hour, and C, what is a value as much as possible into a quantitative term. Once you have these three things there in place, I think it becomes easier for an organization to have BPM in the organization.
Yes. Okay. And now for someone listening now, that they're hearing our conversation and they're understanding how valuable business process management is for an organization, let's just say it's someone from an organization that hasn't implemented BPM. What are some of the challenges that they might face when introducing BPM to their organization?
Okay. When I look at an organization and when I talk to the various the leaders in an organization, I think I've always seen they talk about it: transparency, efficiency, and agility. Right?
Yes.
They always talk about it. And transparency, efficiency, and agility requires an in-depth knowledge about your organization to know what the other people are doing. People should also get a clarity about their roles and responsibilities. So it is a collection of all these things, right? I believe one of the challenge in a business process management, or the objection or the challenge I would say in business process management, is to define the right roles and responsibilities in an organization. As of now, unfortunately, organizations are grouped into a department or a function level. That's how the HR organization structure happens. Is it required? Answer is yes. We definitely require an HR structure of the organization system, because that gives more clarity about the authority, about the ownership in terms of the department. But when we talk about the value creation to our customers or to our stakeholders, it is a cross-functional department, right? That's where I believe one of the challenge happens, because we define the roles and responsibilities department-wise, whereas we deliver a value cross-functional.
Right.
So we miss out the process ownership across the functions. Secondly, a misconception about the process ownership, because it happens. We normally tend to believe that process ownership is all about finding a blame game, or finding out if it does not work right, who is the person we should talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Process ownership, if you take a step back, it is a much bigger role. It is a governance system. When we talk about the process ownership, it is all about looking at the process and finding out what is happening into the process. What is the trend happening into the process? Someone who is not owning from the perspective of success or failure, but someone who is looking at the process and observing where a change is required, what change is required, when a new technology or a change is to be implemented into the process. So this clarity of roles and responsibilities from the process perspective is, I believe, is one of the challenge in an organization, because our organization culture is defined in terms of roles and responsibilities as per HR, whereas creating a value requires a wider perspective of roles and responsibility from the process perspective. So I think that's where the challenge happens in the business process management implementation.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that's a great point. I think process ownership. It's something that it's a very important thing for an organization to have, because otherwise people will be passing responsibility on something if they don't have that ownership. Oh, that's not me. That's not for me to worry about. That's not for me to take care of. That's somebody else, or that's I don't know whose responsibility it is, but it certainly isn't mine. And I think if everyone's saying that, then you've got this process there that no one's, I guess, intentionally looking at to see, well, where are the opportunities for improvement here? Where are the opportunities where we could tweak the process, or where are the opportunities where we could completely radically transform it and innovate it? But maybe talk to us about that point, the incremental improvement versus radical innovation, because there are many processes within an organization, and sometimes it can be quite overwhelming. Firstly, where do you begin? Which processes do you focus on? And you mentioned earlier about identifying critical processes, but then how do you spend your time, effort, and energy? Is it on the incremental, or is it on the radical innovation?
Fantastic. Yes, Daniel, very well said. Yes. It's a maturity versus capability in an organization we always struggle with. Are you looking at improving the capability for a specific value chain, or you are looking at the maturity for the entire organization? And both are important, by the way, right? Sometimes in an engineering organization, perhaps a process related to engineering, the capability of process engineering are much more important over the support processes. Whereas in some other organization, a value chain requires a maturity of support process, let's say purchase function. The maturity of the purchase function or the HR function is equivalent, is as important as the criticality for the core process. For example, one of our customer who are into system engineering, and one of their services is to provide HR the resources, the staffing to their customer.
Right.
Like in that kind of an organization, the maturity of HR function is equally important as compared to the system engineering also into the organization. So organization should identify what are the critical processes where they need to focus on, just as you rightly said. And basis on this, they should pick up what type of roles, responsibilities to be defined, what type of processes will be impacted by these roles.
Yes, that's great. That's really good. And for looking towards the future now, and looking at trends that you're noticing within the various organizations, and I guess understanding that every organization is at a different maturity level and a different stage, and different organizations will require different things at different points. But generally speaking, where do you think organizations need to put their time, effort, and energy in the coming years when it relates to BPM?
Well, I would say business process management, not because I'm a practitioner of a BPM, but I see a huge value of BPM with each passing year now. And this thought of mine, this understanding of future of the BPM is also supported with the various facts of the way which are given through the various reports like Harvard and Foster. If you look at these reports, they are also talking about it, that majority of the process improvement or the digitizations are failed not because of the technology constraints, or the technology is not supportive or not useful, but they are failed because they fail to understand the basic understanding about the process or the customer requirement.
Right.
Right. So with the introduction or and advancement of more digitization like AI, ML, or data science or data mining, the fundamental requirement of process requirement is keep on increasing. The understanding about the process will keep on understanding it, because the cost and investment involved in these digitizations are really huge, not only in terms of the money but also in terms of the time, in terms of the commitment. So any failure in these solutions impacts heavily to the organization, and this is the reason it becomes very critical for the organization to before investing any of it, first they need to validate, does it make any sense to automate this particular process. Or I've never heard about any of the organization who would say we have lack of data. In fact, organizations are having more data than they really required. So directly jumping onto this and use data science or use different methodologies and trying to find out the different correlation and finding the meaning out of the data. The very first thing is the organization should understand about what is the data which is important for me, what is that business objective, what is that question that I want to answer.
Right.
These are fundamental questions, right? These are the questions which should be identified at the management level, right? What is the goal? What is that question which are important for the organization? So this understanding is going to become more deeper. The need of this will become more important and critical over a period of time. And this is the reason 10 years before, when I was looking at BPM, I remember the BPM was, people were looking at it more from the modeling perspective.
Right.
Process designing to process modeling, and they were thinking about this is what the BPM is. But now the perspective is changing. People are thinking about BPM and correlating it with their vision and strategy, and then they are picking up the process which are critical to the organization. I think that the things are changing now, and the speed of change is happening very fast now. I believe because of this corona, I think BPM becomes much more need for the organization once the things will start coming back onto the track.
And speaking of COVID, and speaking of the current year that we have had, what have you noticed in terms of how the turbulent nature of this year has really disrupted a lot of things? It's disrupted many organizations. It's made things more challenging for some organizations, and for other organizations, it's played to their advantage. But talk to us about how business process management can play a part in the, I guess, in the current environment where something outside of everybody's control is now making it challenging to run businesses.
See, last 6-7 months have been very interesting. When I'm saying interesting, I understand it has been challenging too, but interesting in the sense of new learnings, new experiences. A lot of hypotheses have been validated. I remember earlier working from home has been a challenge to the various organizations, but now it has become a need for the organization. But this has again given a lot of perspective to the organization to look at the organization in a different way. To give you an example, Daniel, I remember when I was working with an organization like last year, and the organization was going for the GDPR implementation. There was a different group who were responsible, engaged on implementing GDPR in the organization. And this group was struggling with all the functions, different core group, the execution team, in terms of implementing GDPR in the organization. Now, in the past 6-7 months, things have changed. Now, organization is not looking at the GDPR as a different initiative, because now they are saying people are working from home. So they are more cautious about what is that information which people are consuming or creating, right, remotely. And now how the organization is more concerned about how this data or the information which they are consuming or creating can be protected. right?
Right.
So earlier when the GDPR was considered more of like an initiative for some certification, for some compliance requirement, now this has become a need for the organization, right? So this organization, the management is talking to the GDPR team and asking about, this is what the way that we are doing it. Can you help us to find out where can be the bottlenecks, where can be the breach of the ethics or the code of conduct? So this is what we have been talking about for many years, how your business can integrate your different aspects of the organization. Now this is what is happening. Your technology, your IT are becoming a part of your business operations, and your operation teams are participating in the discussion of technology selection, thinking about what is important for the organization and so on. So I believe this is, the COVID has given a new perspective to the organization, and that's why this is becoming more interesting for us.
Yes, yes. And I think particularly in the current environment, it is important your mindset or your perspective on what's happening, because I think it can be easy to look at the challenges and the hurdles, but then for some people it might be harder to look at the opportunities, and I think what this year has shown us is that for some organizations, it's forced them out of their comfort zone. It's forced them into new territory. It's forced them to try new things. And in some cases, it's played out really well and in favor of that organization. And, if we didn't have the year that we have had, how long would it have taken before that organization would have reached that point? So I think it's a great point you make there about its perspective. It's, well, how are you looking at the turbulent nature of the year? Are you looking at how tough it's going to be, or are you looking at the opportunities that will be presented?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that's great. But I wanted to touch on one other thing, talking about agile versus governance. So, agile, it's quite a popular methodology or thinking about, being quick and quick to adapt and quick to change and doing things on the fly. And then you've got this idea of governance where, well, you need to understand who owns the process and who's responsible, and what are our standards and notations, and what are these things in place that are going to govern the way we manage our processes. And sometimes that it can feel like a little bit of a push and pull there, where an organization wants to move at speed, but then governance is necessary as well. So talk to us. How do you balance that tension?
See, you rightly said governance is about the process ownership. I would like to add one more part of the governance is actually mind the gap, right? What you are expecting versus what you are currently having it, and what is the gap in between it. And this gap is to be evaluated, analyzed, and to be resolved through a process ownership, right? Someone who keep on watching when this gap is happening, why this gap is happening, what we can do in terms of bridge this gap. That's what is an aspect of the governance, right? From the agile perspective, this becomes much more important because from the agility side, we talk about bringing the change as fast as possible, right? So we are not talking about looking at a 6 months period of time and see the change. We are talking about this entire chain, how we can break down into the small success stories, and the success breeds the success. So that is one of the important aspects of agility. You implement it, you learn it, and then when you move to the next phase, you implement your new advanced learning into this, and then you keep on growing. So this aspect of agility, where you implement and you see what is a change requires, what is the learning requires, and then you implement it. This is very well supported through the governance. If there is someone who takes care of this responsibility, who sees that what was expected in this particular phase, what has been delivered, and if it is not delivered that way, what is the gap, or it is delivered but there is an opportunity of running much faster into this and we missed that particular part. That process owner or the governance part plays an important role. So that person, that governance committee can see this, can evaluate it, so that in the next phase it will be much faster. So I think with the help of the governance, the overall velocity of implementing a complete change becomes much faster. That's why the role of the governance, I believe, is very critical and goes hand in hand with the agility.
Yes, that's great. That's really good to hear. And so for someone that's listening right now and they've been listening to our conversation and learning about business process management, but maybe they're in an organization where they feel a little bit like a lone ranger. They're by themselves. No one else is thinking from that process-centric mindset, and they want to learn more about business process management. But obviously, there's a lot out there on the internet. Sometimes it's a bit overwhelming. Which information should I consume, and what's right for the organization I work for at this current time? There's plenty of information out there, but what can I apply right now to my organization? So what would you encourage that person to do that has an appetite for BPM? They want to learn more about BPM, but they don't know where to begin looking.
Daniel, with my experience, I would say this requires one important attribute before you know what are the different sources of learning. One of the important attribute for an individual to learn about BPM is that you understand about how to keep on emptying your glass. Right. So you will get a lot of questions, you learn it, but at the same time, you have to keep on emptying your glass so that you can learn more about it.
Right.
There are, you rightly said, there are a lot of literatures, a lot of informations available on internet, and in the various books, blogs where you can read about BPM. With my experience, I can say that when I started, indeed, I had a lot of learning about it. There is one book that I recommend. It is Roger Trigger's book on reimagining management. I wish if I had it 10 years before, probably the speed would have been much faster. It is very well structured, very well defined about the business process management. We as a human, we always learn much better when it is structured into a particular blocks. Right. That's why the chapters plays an important role. And when I read reimagining management, I found Roger talked about the 7 enablers to understand a business process management, and that gives a complete perspective about the complete holistic approach about the business process management. So this is one of the books that I recommend. Another thing that I always recommend is that any videos, any podcast where you can learn from the practitioners. Right, because we have a constraint of time. We do not have, and we all are not very fan of reading, to be very honest. That's what I've also seen. People do not read very much, and especially when you see 300 400 pages of books, it becomes difficult, right? Best way of learning is to hear the practitioners of business process management through the various videos, and the YouTube is one of the good channels, right? One of the good source of information. So I believe these are the good practices about it. To learn better and faster about the business process management.
That's great. And the guys that are listening right now, if you do have questions, if you do have further questions about our conversation today, and you want to learn more about BPM, I'm sure that Amit would be more than happy for you to connect with him on LinkedIn and send through questions to him. And any questions that have come to mind while we've been talking, please connect with Amit and continue that conversation there. And that's the goal of this podcast series, is that we can only scrape the surface of business process management in a 30, 35, 40 minute interview. We can only really scrape the surface, but if it just sparks one idea, if it sparks one conversation, if it sparks you to go and purchase Roger's book and start reading it, then that is a significant win in my books. But Amit, I just want to thank you for sitting down with me today and being able to share from your experiences and your knowledge there. And I think, that's where, as you were saying, that's where the real value comes in, is learning from those practitioners that are putting BPM into practice. This isn't theory where we've been hearing from what you've been doing day in and day out. And I think that's very valuable to be for people to glean from. So Amit, I just want to thank you for sitting down with me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for this opportunity and to discuss about my knowledge, about my experience with you. Indeed, it is always a pleasure and a proud moment when you know that you are always a part of this BPM community. So thank you so much, and I feel privileged. Thank you. I can provide any information that would help anyone to strengthen their stand on business process management. Thank you so much for this wonderful session organized, Daniel.